All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Dreaming English. And today we have two English teachers, and we have Ken Clay from the UK and myself from United States. So we'll all go around and introduce ourselves, and then have a nice conversation.
Okay. Am I first up?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm Kevin Henry. My name is Kevin Henry. I'm Irish born. I spent the first 17 years of my life in Ireland, but I've been living in London since then. I've done various jobs in public service, local government, stuff like that. A lot of it to do with adult staff training around management issues and that kind of thing. But I also sort of slipped over into teaching English, even to office workers, where I was running courses on how to write an effective letter or email or report or whatever it might be. And then I did a qualification in English language teaching, English as a foreign language or a second language. And I've also done my university degree in English literature and linguistics. So that's just me. I'm semi-retired now, but I still do quite a lot of advising and checking people's documents. Rachelle, you mentioned earlier about university applications. I've done a few of those recently as well, sort of helping young people out, making sure they're okay, and usually picking out the obvious things that young people don't think are relevant, and I think absolutely they are. Anyway, so that's me in a nutshell. Over to
Awesome. I'll go next. So I'm the other English teacher in this group. I'm from the US. I've always lived in the US. I grew up in Chicago, so I have a Midwestern accent. And then now I live in North Carolina. So I've been teaching English reading. I started with kindergartners about 30 years ago. And then I love teaching phonics today. So I love teaching pronunciation, vocabulary, how to say words correctly, some grammar. You can't speak unless you have good grammar, but that's not my focus. Usually my focus is on the differences between long and short vowels and how to say words in the American way versus the British way, things like that. And so I love talking to international students a lot. And that's how I met Rachelle. And Ken was through our group on WhatsApp, which has a lot of people from different countries. And I love helping them with reading passages and telling them how to, pronounce words correctly and things like that. I also teach locally. It's what I do for a living. Local students that are going through elementary school, high school for test prep and things like that, and then adults. So I teach adults how to speak better for their jobs, business English or just everyday English, so they can, maybe get that promotion they want or whatever it is. So I love language. I love linguistics. I've never taken any linguistic courses, but I have a master's in education. And my dad was a professor and he knew a lot of languages. So I get my love of learning from him. And I also know French, so I can compare that. And I have a smattering of other languages, but not a whole lot of any one language beyond French. So, but I love looking at the roots and things like that of words and trying to help people with whatever they need. So that's me.
Well, that's really interesting. I think one I think I'll add, similar to you. I work in high school, not an English teacher, but I do all the college applications and I think you had said before that you did SAT prep. So I do the college applications.
Just the English side.
Just the English side, right? So I do the college applications. I will get them onto Khan Academy for their SAT prep. And then I'll do the financial aid applications with them. And I'm going to start teaching or co-teaching for Google certification. So soon I'm going to be able to know how to fix computers. It's really exciting. And that will give our students an opportunity, like our students that weren't planning to go to college, it'll give them an opportunity to get jobs straight out of high school. So I'm excited about that. So that's just me in a nutshell, what I do.
Can I ask you, Rachelle, before you go on to Ken, what accent do you have? Because Laura mentioned what accent she had.
Oh, right. So I'm from Massachusetts. I don't really talk like people in Boston that would drop their R's. I think that my accent is pretty neutral, as far as accents go. I'm told that it's very clear and easy to understand. But people that would live closer to Boston would probably say park the car and ha the yard. Well, that's like the very stereotypical, but they would drop those R's. So yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, in the central part of Massachusetts.
And
I
where do
think
you
you
live now
sound
then?
closer. I think you
Sorry.
sound closer to New Yorker, but not quite as strong.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was interested in, is because as somebody who was brought up in Ireland for 17 years, so I obviously had a very strong Irish accent, and living in London for so long, I know it's influenced by living in London. If you're
Yeah,
musical at all, you're going to pick up the
yeah,
cadences of another language.
yeah.
So New York is your base, is it? New York is your current base?
It's close. I mean, I live 3 hours north of New York, in near Boston, historic Boston.
Yeah, yeah. So the East is very small. Like there's a bunch of there's a bunch of states, all in close proximity to each other. And so if you have an accent from one place and then you go to another place, it could change, but not drastically. I mean, there is differences. You can hear them. I've heard dialect coaches talk about the difference between the Boston accent and the New York accent. And there are differences, but they're all in the East. So, and just like yours, Kevin, I think you have an accent that's somewhere between Irish and English
Yeah,
because you've mixed the two, so I can hear it.
yeah.
So, Ken, on to you.
Well, I'm Ken, and probably people will know me. I kind of help out on lots of language forums, and I kind of got into it by accident, really, because I was on Spanish forums, and people kept saying, "Can you help us on the English forums?" And as a consequence, kind of got dragged into quite a lot of forums, and for some unknown reason, and I don't know how, so I've kind of ended up sort of being an English teacher without having any understanding of my own language. So most of the time, it's just speaking to people and just helping in that way, or just slightly correcting things and just leaving messages. So I think, unfortunately, there are going to be quite a few people speaking with a very northern accent somewhere in the world. So I apologize in advance for all of those who are learning English and learning my pronunciation of various words. I am sorry to you all. So sorry.
I don't think you have a bad pronunciation. I think you do just fine.
Agree.
So don't put yourself down. You're good.
And I think
Absolutely.
like what I see you doing, Ken, is like teaching in what I call context, which is how I teach. Like you'll make this little video of how you are like cooking something, and you show the kitchen and you're showing all the stuff, and like you're teaching the people in context. So they're learning by the video and your voice and what you're talking about. And that's how I try to teach, because that's how I've learned Spanish. I've learned best by like, there's a YouTuber that will like tell stories and draw pictures. And I learned best by that. It's no grammar at all. It's just all stories and all conversation. And so I think that's what's great about what you're doing in the groups, is like really teaching people by context.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few English teachers on YouTube that I respect. Vanessa is one of them, and she does the same thing, cooking shows with her son or whatever, and then she just picks up vocabulary words or idioms that she wants to highlight, gives them as a PDF, and that's how you learn. And she also has a membership. I want to emulate that someday. I think that would be awesome. But I do little videos on YouTube that are like points of grammar or points of pronunciation, like the difference in pronunciation between love and blood. There's no difference. It's just spelling difference. Or the difference between breathe and breath, or, things like that. So I love pointing out the differences, because my students say, oh, blood? No, it's not blood, it's blood. Let me make a video on that. And then I'll do that. So I love doing that kind of thing. And when you find out what works for you, what your point of, expertise is, why not share that with other people? Find a way. These are like 2-minute videos. So I just started doing them this year. I decided I got to do something that's short and sweet, because people don't have a long attention span. So let's just point out a couple of words, maybe words that people confuse, like accept and accept, or things like that. And then we can just put them in a short video and people, watch it and get more value.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of do the same thing. Like I started doing like things with the YouTube shorts that are like 1 minute or less. To kind of like teach a maybe it's a little idiom or something like that, or maybe it's a little longer video where it could be words that are confused like that, or maybe a few idioms and stuff like that. So I've done stuff like that because I feel like teaching idioms is something that I can teach in context. I can draw pictures. I can show I can like sometimes I'll change the background and I'll have the background kind of like help tell the story of what I'm talking about. So similar things like that.
Yeah, I did an ebook once where I talked about idioms. I have 2 YouTube videos that are longer from a couple years ago. One is food idioms and one is summer idioms. So head in the clouds, day at the beach, that kind of thing. And then the food idioms were like, piece of cake and, stuff like that. So one I made an ebook out of, and I have a picture that shows the idiom and then I talk about it. And then I did a paragraph at the end, like with all the idioms in it. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most difficult areas for a language learner, actually, because idioms just don't follow particular rules as such.
Right.
And you take, say, an idiom of 2 words and you've got a verb and a preposition, and separately they work quite differently. And together in this unique situation, they take on this new meaning. And there isn't even a formula that you can give to students to say, well, if this happens, then this is an idiom or that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you just have to learn idioms. And as you said, Rachelle, it's another example of learning in context. Because how do you know when you're using the idiom correctly? And then you've got collocations which work in a very similar way. A lot of them are idioms in their own right. And you say certain things with the preposition, and it's an idiom, but a different preposition doesn't work in the same way.
That's true.
That's really difficult to teach. I have great sympathy for language learners trying to. All you can do is learn them with the content. I like the idea of the summer and the sky and those kind of themes.
Right.
That's what we're learning, actually.
Yeah, and I always can tell when somebody's from another country like Britain, when they use a idiom that I wouldn't use.
Yeah.
Like, just something that, oh no, we don't say that in America, but you might say it over there. It is perfectly normal. But there's a lady that's on my Laurel's Learning Lab on WhatsApp, and she's also on my Facebook page. And she sometimes gives examples of this guy's training, and she is really studious. She's from Vietnam, I think. And she says, I learned these 5 idioms this week, and this is how I think I say them. And I'm like, yeah, that's good, but I've never heard this idiom, so I don't think we use it here, or she'll maybe, usually she says when I do SAT prep, for example, with Americans, sometimes they don't get how to use it, or maybe there's words that they don't know very well. They've learned something for the first time and they don't use it correctly. So you're right. It's difficult to know how to use them correctly.
Yeah, there's an idiom actually that I always assumed was American in origin, and it turns out Americans don't recognize, or a lot of Americans don't recognize it, and it's an incredibly popular one on these islands, the UK and Ireland, which is somebody has lost the plot. If you lose the plot, I mean, Ken recognizes it immediately, but it's an incredibly it's a very powerful one. It's informal. You wouldn't use it in a formal situation, but it's very popular and very common. And it just means, you've lost the plot, you've lost the thread or you've lost a sense of logic. And you just say you've lost the plot. And to me, it sounded American, like Hollywood or something, Hollywood plots.
No,
and it turns out it's not American at all. Have you heard of it before?
No, I haven't.
I haven't.
Lost the plot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I lose the plot quite regularly, to be perfectly honest.
It's incredibly popular, and it's very expressive. It's very expressive. That's what I like about idioms.
Yes.
Pandora's box. I mean, that's another one. Oh, you've opened Pandora's box.
I mean, I've heard that one.
That's almost a metaphor, actually, but it's
So, you've let the cat out of the bag. You spoiled the surprise.
Can of worms.
Opened. Yes, can of worms. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yep. All those are fun.
They have a lot in common as well.
And I always tell my students, or anybody that asks, think of it as a literal thing at first, like somebody kicked the bucket. What does that mean? You kick a bucket. Well, where does that come from? That comes from when somebody was hanging and then they had a bucket under them and somebody kicked the bucket. That means they died. So it's now figurative. Did you really die, or did somebody? No, it's just a figurative thing. Or maybe it is a literal thing. Maybe we use them as a euphemism. So a euphemism is when you say something nice about something that's unpleasant. So
Indeed.
bucket is one of those.
I think you're right. I think a lot of them are historically literal, but they've been semantically bleached or shifted in their semantic
Right.
meaning. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've
That's a
done
good way to
ones
put
too
it.
where I look up the whole like historic, like
History,
where did it come
right.
from, and I will make a
Yes.
video of it. Like one was like coffin nail, which first was like in Shakespeare, and then you hear it again in Christmas Carol, and basically like the whole like where is that coming from? Because I find that
Coffin
interesting.
nail?
So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Okay.
in things like that, there was a number of them. Like one of them was like an arm and a leg, which I thought was like, okay, if you had a painting and you wanted to have your arms and legs, it would cost more, but it didn't actually come from that. It was like, no, it was the same amount of money. Like it just matters how big the painting is. But it was actually coming out of like war, when the cost of war was people were losing their arms and legs. That's where the actual, but people, there's like this whole like mythology that people think that it came from when people were making paintings, that they would charge you more if they included your arms and legs. Like, no, that wasn't.
That's crazy. There's a lot of misconceptions, aren't there?
Yes. So then I'll make a
Yeah.
video about that, and like kind of like teach the meaning of it, but then also like a little bit of historical context, because I think that will make it a little interesting, and maybe people will like remember it if I teach that historic
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. I have a couple of
Absolutely.
British ones, if you guys want to hear these.
Right.
Are these
Don't
that you're
throw
not
the-
familiar with in the States, or you know them?
Well,
but
no, we
you-
use them. We use them here, but I think the historical context comes from Britain. So the first one is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Really, that's a British one. Yeah, I would have thought
Yeah.
that would be universal. Yeah. Amazing.
Well, maybe it is, but the reason that I say it is because the way I heard it, and you hear histories of where these sayings came from, and what the story is that back in Britain in whatever 1600s, 1700s, when they didn't have running water, they just had one bathtub. Everybody used the water in this bathtub, and you only got to take a bath like once a week or once a month or whatever. So the father went first because he's the patriarch, then the mother, then the kids, then the baby. By the time the baby gets in the bath water, it's so murky you can't even see the baby in there. So don't throw the baby out with the bath water.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
So
and the
what-
second
what-
one is when it's raining cats and dogs, and there's a thatched roof, and the animals, but cats and dogs are up there for the warmth. And then all of a sudden it starts raining, and then they slide off the roof, and people are thinking, oh, it's raining cats and dogs.
Mm.
So
So the
have
baby
you
and the
heard the
bathwater.
explanations?
What's
these?
do you know what the baby and the bathwater, how it's used in modern British English, or you just know the history of it?
I know the history. Well, I think what it means is don't nix a project just because you don't like one detail about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't throw out the good with the bad. Basically.
Exactly.
With great respect to babies, but
Mhm. And raining cats
Yeah.
and dogs, I don't really know. I mean, in French, the saying is it's raining like hordes. So the water is so thick that it's raining like hordes. So it's a similar expression, meaning the same thing, but it doesn't sound the same at all.
yeah, cats and dogs is it's raining very heavily. Basically, that's all
Exactly.
it means. It's an
Mhm.
alternative. Yeah.
Which is one of those
Yeah.
things which is not really used today. I mean, I wouldn't use it. I'd probably say it's hammering it down or it's lashing it down. But the last time I used
Wow.
cats and dogs is yonks ago. I mean, absolutely, I can't remember. But you see it all the time as something which is taught. And I keep saying to people, well, it's good to know it, but actually, I wouldn't use it, and I really don't
I know.
come across that many British people.
I
who do use it.
think, I mean, I use it for sure. And then I have taught that to other people, and then I guess in all other languages, or at least every person that I've spoken to, like in Spanish and French and in Italy, they'll say that they say the same thing. Like they might have some other things to say, it's raining hard, but they also will say in their own language, it's raining cats and dogs. So it must be pretty universal.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you will
Yeah.
have regional ones. I mean, that one you mentioned, Ken, hammering, is not one I'm familiar with. So you will
Yeah.
have regional British sayings as well.
Mm.
Mhm.
So-
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the hammering one down, I think, is very much northeast. I mean, I think it's one of the things that if you're a native, you're going to pick it up. And I suspect you will pick up the variations. So if you change the animals in terms of the raining, you're going to understand what it's about, because it makes sense. I mean, I know in terms of some of the idioms I'm aware of, the history is quite important. And I think a lot of them actually come out of the military as well. So 7 sheets
to the wind.
To the wind.
I do know.
Or 7 sheets.
7 sheets to the wind, isn't it?
7 sheets to the wind.
Yeah.
Which means
that reminds me of pirates.
So
No.
what is that meaning? Because I'm not familiar with that one. Or anybody else that's watching?
Go on.
7 sheets is you're drunk.
Oh, right. Okay, right.
Or as we
maybe
say,
I have heard that one, but I haven't
One thing I learned when I went to Britain, when I was in school, because I was an English literature major. So we went to London, Ireland, and Wales for my senior summer semester. So one thing I learned when I was in Britain, and I didn't drink a lot, so I hung out with these British guys for a little while that drank, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna go get pissed." I'm like, "Go get mad?" No, we're gonna go get drunk. I'm like, "Oh, that's what it means."
Yeah, but I've noticed that with American TV programs, generally it seems to be, to be pissed is to be angry in American English. But I've also heard Americans using it in the British way of some. No, actually, no, it's the other way around. To be pissed off would be the British version of pissed. But I've heard Americans use that as well. Some Americans use that as well.
I guess you don't need the off to be angry.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Laurel, can I just point something out which is quite interesting? And this is a language, but of a different sort. Never do that to a British person. It's actually offensive. Yeah,
really?
That's offensive. That's not.
Huh.
Okay.
That comes under the banner of semiotics, I think. Yeah.
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 But I mean, that it's this thing about language, because language isn't just language. I mean, there are gestures which don't translate between cultures, and you would think they would, but they don't. But and it's purely.
I know it's
British.
not good to point at somebody like, "Don't do this," right? This is what you're doing. But I don't mean to. I mean, this is victory or this is victory. I'm not sure which one.
That's victory.
Yes, that would be.
That's a bit like that in terms of how it works in Britain. So I'm going to say language is more than just what comes out of your mouth. Body language. I mean, there are certain gestures you wouldn't do in Spain or Italy or elsewhere because they don't have the same significance in other cultures. And you would have thought,
right.
So it's just an FYI.
I didn't even realize I was doing it. So
well, you wouldn't, because it's not culturally relevant.
Right.
But I do point it out to people at times.
I mean, I do this a lot. That's okay, right?
That's fine. I do that all the time. I regularly do that.
And that's good for British Sign Language as well.
Yeah. I'm like, everything okay? Stuff like that. Yep. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't know if it comes from Shakespeare or what, but like, this is okay and this is bad. Like, they'll cut off their
I think it's
head.
Romans, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, we'll kind of diverge slightly away from spoken language into visual language, but it's all forms of communicating. I mean, so many times when I'm talking to people, I use the visual language to help clarify things or to give confirmation that they're doing something right. Because I think one of the things as a language learner as well is some of these problems you have just getting your head around. And I'm pretty, idioms. I'm trying to explain idioms to people. It's like they are just totally illogical at times. You just kind of think, other languages just don't seem to have them in the way that we do, and you wonder how the hell English has developed. I mean, I always call English a dog's dinner of a language, because I do think it is. Because you look at Spanish and it's logical. The grammar's logical. To an extent, I mean, it's 90% logical, 10% illogical. It seems to me that English is 10% logical and 90% illogical. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a teacher, so could you?
Did you recognize that expression, dog's dinner? Dog's dinner, is that an expression?
I've never heard that.
Yeah, because when I heard Ken say it, I thought, now that's probably one that you've never heard. Dog's dinner,
Yeah.
Ken.
No, I haven't. I
Dog's
haven't
dinner.
heard that.
Me neither.
You're
Yeah.
making a mess.
And what does
You're
it
making
mean?
a mess of something. You're making a mess of
Okay.
something. Totally
Yeah.
a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You know how you might mash up a dog's dinner, that kind of idea.
Right.
I kind
and
of use it to mean that it works. It feeds the animal, but it doesn't look particularly great. And I think, you know, that's how I describe English when I have this. Like, you know, it works. It does what it needs to do. But if you look at it against a logical language,
Yeah.
it's going to go, this is a mess. This is a
I
complete
mean, I
mess.
think of it as like a mud of a language, because it's a mix of, like, you know, Germanic and Latin and some Greek in there, and just like the mud of languages.
Yeah. There's a lot of languages that feed into English to make it multicultural. And, you know, and that's why there's so many rules. So, and that's why the spelling has changed. That's why everything is the way it is because somebody decided to take, you know, Shakespeare wrote his name like 5 or 6 different ways. There was no codification back then. He could have spelled it with any spelling he wanted and it was okay because nobody cared. And nowadays it's very important to spell, you know, things the way they should be, because, you know, you could mistake somebody's name or you could mistake a word for another word because it's not codified. And also, you know, you have mistakes that happen with if you don't have a silent letter in there. You know, silent letters are there for a purpose. And so if you don't have that, then it could be plain or it could be plan. Which one is it? You know, hop or hope, you know, pine or pin, you know, all these things. And so you have to say them right so people understand it. And sometimes there's a faux pas, something bad that somebody will say because you didn't spell it right, you know, or you didn't pronounce it right.
Or even a false step.
A false step. See, you got that.
A faux pas.
So, I love French expressions, putting them in our language. You know, faux ami is a false friend.
Faux ami.
So that's a word that means something like sensible and nice.
Sensé and sensible.
Sensible is the same thing as sensitive.
The other way around, yeah, in English.
Yeah, the other way. Yeah. So
sensitive. Sensé is sensible is sensitive. And sensé is the sensible one in English.
Exactly. So if you're sensible, then you don't tell somebody they're sensitive. You know, it's 2 different things. Yeah. So and there's a lot of those, and so you really have to know.
That works in Spanish as well. Sensible. And the other one will come to me. It's. I mean, again, because it comes from the Romantic language. It comes from Latin. Yeah. So you can see. You can see how.
Another one is simpa. So sympathique means nice. It doesn't mean sympathetic. It means nice.
Yeah.
So the other one I love is demander. So if you demand something from somebody, then you're kind of being forceful. But in French, je demande just means I'm asking you something.
Asking. It's true.
Do you guys?
Well, in Spanish, if you have a discussion, it's like an argument. You know, we're having a discussion. We're having a discussion. But if you use that same word in Spanish, it's like a harsh argument.
I was just going to ask both Karen and Laurel. I mean, because you're dealing with foreign students, do you see certain languages having problems with English, and are they sort of fairly consistent? Do some languages pick up on English easier than others? I mean, have you guys noticed anything about working with
the Latin, the Germanic languages and the Latin-based languages? This is obviously from a European perspective. Those speakers tend to find it easier to learn English, whereas if you've got somebody coming from Sino-Tibetan or any of the Indian languages, one word that people beyond Europe have great difficulty with is accountant, because you know, to French speakers or Spanish speakers, it sounds very similar to something like they know, whereas to a Japanese person, it's completely different, and they can't connect it at all to their own language. So, there are vocabulary problems sometimes that some students have problems with.
Yeah.
Laurel?
And I also think there's cultural things too. So, I mean, I know that people from like the Middle East, love to call people dear, like, okay, dear. And that is not something that I would say you can call me right away because I don't know you that well. You know, so and also they sometimes call me sir because I'm like, no, you call me ma'am. Well, where does that come from? Madame. Okay. You know, and so they're all confused. Well, what do I call you? Miss Archer? Okay. Now, well, I'm married, but Miss is easier than Mrs. You know, so it's all this whole like cultural thing of how you say things. Even when I was teaching, you know, it's easier to say Miss Archer than it is to say Mrs. Archer or whatever.